Hi all. We are discussing control and coordination chapter of biology class 10th Cbse. This is the fourth video of the series. Please watch all the three videos before starting this video. In this video, we'll be discussing about the reflex action and reflex arc as well as the parts of the nervous system. So what exactly is reflex action? We already told that in case a stimulus comes, then what happens? The brain analyzes the message and we react or respond to the situation in accordance to what the brain says. But in some situations, very critical situations, what happens is that we may not get time, the brain may not get time to analyze the situation because they might be life threatening situations. Say for example, you are touching some hot object, so the response has to be generated immediately, so before the brain can analyze. So if we take the time to send the message that we have touched a hot object, and we are sending the message to the brain, and brain is taking its sweet time to analyze the pain and the heat and then instructing the muscle, then it is going to take a long time and already the damage would have been done. So in those kind of situations, the response has to be generated immediately. that is uh, that is when the reflex action, this particular word, that is reflex action, that is a spontaneous and rapid action which is taking place, that comes into picture. So reflex action, if you see, it is the simplest form of response of the nervous system. Here no complicated thinking process or analyzing process, all those things do not happen. So this is the simplest form in which the nervous system works. So what is reflex? Reflex is a rapid and automatic, it is very quick and it happens without our thinking, automatic response to a stimulus like something which happens to a life threatening situation, or say when we are exposed to bright light, all those things evoke response in us. This is an involuntary action, that is, we do not think and do this particular action. This happens naturally and automatically. Say for example, if a stone or paper comes to your eyes, you automatically involuntarily close your eyes, right? You do not think and close your eyes, you involuntarily do that. These kind of actions are known as reflex actions. So touching a hot plate, coughing and yawning and sneezing, all these things are reflex actions. We do reflex action in order to protect ourselves. So reflex action is very, very important. Even when the brain is so developed in vertebrates, the evolution has not eliminated the reflex action. Why? Because reflex action is actually very critical for in order to protect ourselves. That is why, in spite of having a wonderful and most evolved brain, the reflex action is still existing even when it is a very basic way in which the nervous system works. Okay, so reflex, what are some examples of reflex action? Pupils getting, that is in your eyes, the pupils get bigger and the pupils get smaller, right? Smaller based on the bright light, or based on if it is a bright light or if it is a dim light. That is also part of the reflex action. Now how does the reflex action work? So basically there are two types of reflex actions. Okay, the reflex action generated by spine is known as a spinal reflex. We will get into the detail right now. And the reflex action which are initiated by the brain are known as cerebral reflexes. So how does that, we'll go into detail of these two. Okay, how does a reflex action work? So we can say that, say for example, if you are touching a hot plate. Okay, if you are touching a hot plate, what happens? The receptor sets off a chemical reaction and an electrical impulse is generated. The electrical impulse is carried by the sensory neurons to the spinal cord. Ideally, what happens is spinal cord should inform the brain, but the spinal cord understands that this is a very important and life-threatening situation. You are going to, burn your hands. So what happens? The sensory neuron brings the message to the spinal cord, and another person comes. Who is that? Relay neuron comes. Relay neuron is a special kind of neuron which connects the sensory neuron directly to the motor neurons. Okay, so the relay neuron gives the message that please pull your hands away. So the message is given to the motor neuron directly by the spinal cord using the relay neuron. Now the motor neuron brings the message to the muscles of your hands. Okay, now what happens? The muscles contract and pulls the bone towards it, and that is how your hands move away from the hot plate. So what happens here? Here the stimulus is heat, the receptor received, and then what happens? The message was sent to the spinal cord through the sensory neurons, and in the spinal cord there were special neurons known as relay neurons which send the message directly to the motor neurons, and the motor neurons commanded the muscles of your arm, which is the effector, right? Here the effector is the muscles of your arm, and using the muscles, the lifting of the hand was done. So the hand moved away from the hot plate. This is how the reflex action worked. So the path through which this particular action happened, the pathway taken by the nervous impulse in the reflex action. So here this was the pathway, right? This was the pathway through which the reflex action traveled, right? This was the pathway. This pathway is known as reflex arc. So what is reflex arc? The pathway taken by the nerve impulse in the reflex action. This is known as reflex arc. So here who generated this particular reflex action? Spinal cord generated. So in case the reflex action is initiated by the spine, this will be known as a spinal reflex. So here only the spine was involved. So reflex action can be generated by the brain as well, like changing the pupil size, or cuffing. All those things can be generated by the brain as well. So if reflex action is initiated by the brain, then it is known as a cerebral reflex. Cerebral reflex occurs mainly in cerebrum. So because of cerebrum, we are going to discuss about the parts of the brain. So one of the most important part of the brain is cerebrum. So cerebral reflexes are occurring because of the action of the cerebrum, which is present in the head. So as I told you, the size adjustment of the pupil and vomiting sensation, all those things are cerebral reflexes. So we are going to talk about the reflex action again. So you touched a hot plate. So if you are touching a hot plate, then it requires very quick and automatic involuntary response. Now we decided that we are going to have a reflex action. So heat is sensed by the thermoreceptor of your hand first. The receptor triggers an impulse, and through the sensory neuron, this is transmitted to the spinal cord. Now the message is passed to the relay neuron. As I already showed you in the picture, the message was transmitted to the relay neuron. Now what does a relay neuron do? Relay neuron passes it to the motor neuron. Now what does a motor neuron do? Motor neuron passes the impulse to the muscles of your arm, and the muscle of the arm, which is the effector, contracts. What does it do? It contracts. So when the muscle contracts, the bone is pulled. The bone which is in your hand is pulled, and because of the pulling of the bone, your hand is pulled away from the hot plate. Okay, so though the spine generated the reflex and saved your hand, but still after some time, after like seconds, you are going to feel the pain. So what happened there? Even when the reflex was generated, the spine, it is not like the spine is hiding things from brain. It is going to transmit that such a thing has happened to brain. Okay, after the brain receives all the messages like the heat stimulus and all those things, the brain is going to process the pain, and you will feel the pain. Okay, though spinal reflex is produced, it is not like the spinal cord is hiding things from the brain. The spine will send the message which will reach the brain. So when the message reaches the brain, what happens? Heat and pain will be acting as a stimulus, and we will be realizing the pain and heat on our fingers or hand. Now we already discussed that here when the message reaches a muscle, the muscle contracts. Muscle is able to pull the hands away from the hot plate. How is the muscle able to do that? See, when the message reaches the muscle or effector organ, which is the muscles here, then muscle is able to take a action. Why? Because muscles are made up of special kind of cells, which are muscle cells. Okay, there are lot of different kinds of muscle cells, and in these muscle cells there are special kind of proteins. These proteins have a capability that they can change the shape. They can contract and they can expand. Okay, these muscles are made up of special protein which can change the shape and contract. So when the muscle cells contract, what happens? They pull the bones of the body, which will help to take the hands away from the hot plate. So when an electrical impulse reaches when an electrical impulse reaches the hand muscles, what happens? It stimulates the biceps of the muscles of the upper arm. Biceps means whatever muscles are there in the front portion. This is the bicep. So biceps, it triggers the biceps and the biceps contract and the bones are pulled with the biceps. Bones of the hands are pulled and the hands move away from the hot plate. That is how we are able to the muscles are able to actually respond to the messages which are coming from the spinal cord or from the brain. So now we are going to discuss about the next topic, which is the parts of the nervous system. So if you see, what are the main parts of the nervous system? So there are basically, now the nervous system is basically divided into two parts, which is the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system consists of brain and spinal cord. Central nervous system consists of the main part, which is the brain and spinal cord. All the nerves together consist of the peripheral nervous system. Now, peripheral nervous system is divided into autonomic nervous system and voluntary nervous system. What is autonomic nervous system? Autonomic nervous system is the set of nerves which actually control involuntary actions like heartbeat or peristaltic movement. All these things are controlled by the autonomic nervous system. This is not directly under our thought control, voluntary control. But then what is voluntary nervous system? Voluntary nervous system comes directly under the voluntary control of the brain. So, nervous system is consists of central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system consists of brain and spinal cord. All the nerves together form the peripheral nervous system, and peripheral nervous system is divided into voluntary nervous system and autonomic nervous system. Again, if you see, peripheral nervous system consists of all nerves. That is, it consists of cranial nerves, spinal nerves, as well as visceral nerves. Okay, so if you see the autonomic nervous system controls and regulates the functioning of the internal organs. They are involuntary. We cannot directly control the heartbeat or the peristaltic movement or the movement of the stomach and lungs, right? These are involuntary movements which are controlled by the autonomic nervous system. And autonomic nervous system has very specific set of nerves which control the heartbeat, digestion, sweating, etc. So this is what autonomic nervous system is actually what keeps us alive. Okay, so the nerves of the autonomic nervous system, how they are attached to? They are attached to the heart muscles or stomach muscles. All the involuntary muscles are smooth muscles. So muscles also can be divided into three types: voluntary and involuntary and cardiac muscles. Voluntary, involuntary and cardiac muscles. Okay, so here involuntary muscles are also called smooth muscles. So obviously the involuntary muscles, which are the smooth muscles, are attached to autonomic nervous system, because autonomic nervous system is not under the voluntary control of human beings. They are attached to the internal organs like heart, and stomach and sweat glands, etc. So all these are composed of smooth muscles, which are involuntary muscles. So the nerves of the autonomic nervous system are attached to the smooth muscles of the internal organs like blood vessels, alimentary canal, lungs, kidneys. None of these are under our voluntary control. But then if you see voluntary nervous system, this helps us do the voluntary actions like writing or kicking a ball or dancing, etc. These are under the voluntary control, conscious control of the brain. Okay, so all the voluntary nerves are attached to what? The voluntary muscles. All the voluntary nerves, all the nerves of the voluntary nervous system are attached to the voluntary muscles which help us do various activity. Now coming to the central nervous system. So what is central nervous system made up of? Central nervous system is made up of, so I already told you nervous system is divided into central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. We briefly discussed about the autonomic nervous system and voluntary nervous system. Now we are going to talk about the central nervous system. Central nervous system, basically we have brain and spinal cord, right? So brain is the most important part of our body as well as the central nervous system. So this is the highest coordinated center in the body. This is a master of all organs in the body. So where is brain located? Brain is located inside the skull. It is protected using the skull. If you tap your head, you can feel the sound produced by the skull. So this is protected by a bony box. There is a bony box in the skull which is known as cranium. So inside the skull there is a bony box inside which the brain is placed. So protect the the brain is protected by a bony box in the skull which is known as cranium. And moreover, inside the cranium there are three layers of membranes. Those three layers of membranes are known as meninges. They also do the function of protecting the brain. So three membranes are present inside the cranium. These membranes are known as meninges. And between the meninges, there is a fluid. Meninges, the space between the meninges is filled with a fluid which is known as cerebrospinal fluid, which helps the brain from some shock which comes from outside. Okay, space between the meninges is filled with cerebrospinal fluid, which helps to protect the brain from shocks which comes from outside. So basically, brain is the highest coordinating center. How is the brain protected? It is located inside the skull, and it is kept inside a bony box in the skull, which is known as cranium, and it is surrounded by three membranes, which are called meninges. The space between the meninges is filled with fluid, which is cerebrospinal fluid. This cerebrospinal fluid helps the brain from shocks. Now, if you see, the brain is divided into three parts. Okay, forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. Now, the forebrain mainly consists of cerebrum. Forebrain consists of cerebrum. So, cerebrum is one of the most important areas. Okay, and forebrain mostly consists of cerebrum, and midbrain is not divided further. But then hindbrain consists of pons, cerebellum, and medulla. Okay, hindbrain is further divided into pons, cerebellum, and medulla. Now, if you see cerebrum is the largest part of the brain. Cerebrum is the main part of the cerebrum is the largest as well as the main part of the brain. So if you see, cerebrum is also known as forebrain. Okay, this is a thinking part of the brain. So what does cerebrum do? This helps us to think. So thinking is automatically linked to learning, reasoning, intelligence, personality, memory. Everything is related to studies. You learn, you reason in mathematics, and you use intelligence in physics. Your personality is decided by your studies, and you memorize years of history. So everything related to studies is done by cerebrum. Okay, so cerebrum is a thinking part of the brain. It is a site of learning. You reason, your intelligence, your personality, your memory, everything is done by the cerebrum. Also, cerebrum helps us in thinking and helps us to understand the sensations. Also, it helps us to do the voluntary activity. Okay, all these things are done by the cerebrum. So cerebrum is a region which controls thinking and also memory. Also, it stores the information and experiences. Cerebrum is an area. It has association areas. Association areas control thinking and memory. This area also controls, this area also stores the information and past experiences. So there are some areas called association areas which store information and experiences, and also there are sensory areas. What does cerebrum have? They have sensory areas. What does a sensory area do? Sensory area receive information from various sense organs like eyes, ears, and other areas. So sensory area is a area to which all the sensory nerves report to, right? So sensory areas receive information from various sense organs. Now there are motor areas as well. The cerebrum sent information to the muscles using these motor areas. Now all the voluntary actions are coordinated by the cerebrum. So cerebrum receives all the sensory information from the sense organs, and what does the cerebrum do? Cerebrum interprets it using the past experiences. Where are the past experiences stored? Past experiences are stored in the association areas. So cerebrum analyzes all the information using the past experiences, and then a decision is taken, and then using the motor area it sends out information to the motor nerves, and through which the effectors are informed. So there are various parts in the cerebrum, which is association area is there, sensory area is there, and motor areas are there. Association areas basically control the thinking and memory. Sensory areas receive information from the sense organ, and motor area sends out information to through the motor neurons to various parts of the body. Also, cerebrum is the major thinking part of the brain. It is the site of learning, reasoning, intelligence, personality, and memory. And moreover, it controls thinking and helps us, sensing things. And also, movement, voluntary activities are under the control of the cerebrum. All the voluntary actions are coordinated by the cerebrum using the help of the sensory area, motor area, and association areas. Now, if you come to cerebellum, which is we are going to talk about the midbrain next. So, midbrain, what does it do? So, we already told that cerebral reflexes are controlled by the starting from the brain, right? So, brain, the reflexes starting from the cerebrum or the brain are known as cerebral reflexes. So midbrain, what does it do? It controls reflex movements of head, neck, and trunk. So there are a lot of reflex movements associated to head, neck, tongue, etc. All these responses, like visual reflexes, auditory responses to the visual stimuli, auditory stimuli, all these things are controlled by the midbrain. So what does the midbrain do? Midbrain controls the reflex movements of the head, neck, and trunk in response to visual and auditory stimuli. It also controls the reflex of the eye muscles and also changes the pupil size and shape of the eye lens. So, eye lens, basically the shape changes based on where the object is. So, changing the shape of the eye lens is done by the midbrain. Also, the changing of the pupil size is done by the midbrain. Now, if you see the hindbrain, the back side of the brain, hindbrain, the lowest portion of the brain, it is divided into pons, cerebellum, and medulla. Now, what do pons do? Pons regulate the respiration rate. Now, cerebellum also is an important part of the brain which helps us maintain the balance of the body or posture of the body. Sometimes what happens when you are actually riding a bicycle, if you see, cerebellum is the part of the brain which helps us maintain the balance. So if you see people who drink alcohol, if you see, the cerebellum is affected, and that is why they will not be able to walk in a straight line, because the balance of the body is affected, because the drinking affects the cerebellum. So cerebellum also helps us to make precise and accurate movements. It coordinates the working of the smooth parts of the smooth body movements as well. It helps coordinate smooth body movements, which doesn't require much thinking. Say you are walking, this is an automatic thing, right? You don't have to think when you are walking. You don't have to think that you have to put your right leg first and then you have to put your left leg. So this happens smoothly and automatically. Such cyclic activities like driving, if you are an expert in driving, you don't have to think while you drive. So such movements are actually coordinated by cerebellum. So it helps to maintain the posture and balance of the body, and also it helps us to make precise and accurate movements. It also coordinates smooth body movements like walking, dancing, driving, etc. So that is it about the cerebellum as well. Now coming to medulla. What does medulla do? Medulla controls a lot of involuntary actions like heartbeat, breathing, blood pressure, peristaltic movement of alimentary canal. All these things are controlled by medulla. Medulla also controls some reflexes like swallowing is there, and coughing is there, sneezing, secretions of saliva, vomiting. If you see everything, most of the things are related to digestion, right? So alimentary canals, peristaltic movement is controlled by medulla. And if you see swallowing is controlled by, see, all these things are related to digestion. Swallowing is there, and saliva, production of saliva is there, vomiting, all these things are controlled by medulla. And some breathing also is some things related to respiration also is controlled by medulla. That is, breathing is controlled by medulla, and coughing is controlled, sneezing reflexes are controlled by medulla. So medulla controls a lot of involuntary activities like breathing, blood pressure, peristaltic movement of alimentary canal, and also reflexes like swallowing, coughing, sneezing, and secretion of saliva and vomiting. All these things are reflexes. These are controlled by medulla. So what does cerebellum do? Cerebellum basically maintains the posture of the body, helps us do smooth body movements like dancing, riding bicycle, pencils, picking up a pencil, etc. You don't have to think, you just pick up the pencil, right? So such smooth body movements are controlled by cerebellum, which doesn't require much thinking, but then all the voluntary actions are controlled by cerebrum. So that is it regarding brain, which is a very important part of the central nervous system. So we studied as to how brain is protected, what are the regions of the brain, and what are their functions. And also we studied what are the function reflexes which are generated by the brain, and who generates the reflexes. Next we are going to study the spinal cord. Now spinal cord is actually a cylindrical structure. If you see spinal cord is a cylindrical structure. Spinal cord actually starts as a continuation of the medulla. So it continues from the medulla, and it travels through and it extends downwards. This is enclosed in a bony cage. Okay, this bony cage, which is known as a backbone, this is known as a vertebral column. So spinal cord is also surrounded by meninges like like brain. If you see, brain has 3 layers of meninges. Likewise, spinal cord also has layers which are protecting it, which are known as meninges. There are totally we have already discussed that nerves are connected to brain, and there are other nerves which are connected to spinal cord as well. So the nerves which are connected to spinal cord are known as spinal nerves. So in total there are 31 pairs of nerves which arise from spinal cord, or which are connected to the spinal cord. Now what does spinal cord do? Spinal cord is basically concerned with the spinal reflexes. Spinal cord initiates all the spinal reflexes, as well as it conducts the nerve impulse from various parts of the body to the brain. So most part of the body, it informs the spinal cord. It passes a message to the spinal cord, and it is a spinal cord's duty to inform the brain. So spinal cord is concerned with spinal reflex actions, and what does it do? It informs the messages from various parts of the body to the brain. Okay, spinal reflexes as well as conduction of nerve impulses to and from the brain. Okay, so that is a function of the spinal cord. So we studied the most important part of the central nervous system, CNS. CNS are most important part are brain and spinal cord. How is spinal cord protected? Spinal cord is protected because it is placed inside vertebral column, and also it has meninges. That is how it is protected. We also discussed the functions of brain as well as spinal cord. So thank you. In the next video, we are going to discuss the hormonal system.